Hello friends, it's that time again. Let's get weird with type. Today I'm going to talk through the process behind this typography piece where the letters are being distorted by water droplets. For this drawing I'm using a ruler, a 3H pencil, an HB retractable pencil, a white pencil, a white gel pen and a pair of compasses. I'm starting with a top-down, two-dimensional view with no perspective. At this stage it's just flat type. I begin with a simple grid to help plan where the letters will sit. Because I'm going to distort the type later, I want these letterforms themselves to be quite uniform, simple and geometric. The cleaner the letters are at this stage, the more clearly the distortion will read later on. Now I'm using a pair of compasses to place circles where I want the raindrops to be. I'm trying to position them where they'll interact with the typography underneath in interesting ways. Not just sitting on top of the letters, but actually changing how those letters behave. Now I'm marking out how the droplets distort the type below. And this is the first stage of turning the flat drawing into something with a sense of depth. It's still only the construction drawing at this point, not the final piece. So this is where I can experiment, erase, adjust things, and work out how far I can push the illusion. And this is quite a tricky stage. The idea came from looking at refraction and distortion in everyday life, raindrops, glass, water, other transparent surfaces. And what I noticed is that the distortion tends to increase towards the edges of the droplets. That's because the surface is curving away from us there, so the angle between the surface and the eye becomes more extreme. And that observation becomes the rule for the drawing. The letters can stay calmer near the centre of each drop, but they start to bend and pull more dramatically towards the edge. I'll be using dark cardstock for the final piece, so the construction work needs to be transferred. I use a light box to copy the line work onto tracing paper, and you'll see that I reverse the drawing. That way, when I flip it over and go back over it later, the design transfers the right way round onto the dark stock. The important thing here is that I only transfer the final lines, not all the construction lines. The construction drawing can be messy, but the final transfer needs to contain only the information I actually want in the finished piece. Now I'm marking out all the shadows cast by the droplets. This is the second stage in suggesting their three-dimensional shape. And I'm thinking about where I want the light source to be, but I'm also trying to keep in mind how droplets actually behave in real life, how they distort, magnify, darken, brighten, and throw light around. So now I take the cardstock, reverse the tracing so it appears the right way round, and tape it in place. I'm using the 3H pencil for the transfer because it keeps the lines crisp. I'm also using quite low pressure, so the lines don't become too dark or too heavy on the dark stock. Now I start rendering in pencil. I'm using the 3H pencil for everything outside the droplets and the HB pencil for everything inside them. And this is the third stage of creating the droplet effect. The water changes the tone of the type underneath and the shadows change it again. So at this point there are three main tonal values: the letters in shadow and the letters seen through the droplet. For now I'm keeping those tones fairly flat and consistent. And I'll introduce gradient shading later, but at this stage I want the values to be quite controlled so the illusion has a clear foundation. Now I start rendering the droplets themselves, and this is where the gradient shading comes in. You can see from the direction of the cast shadows that the light source is coming from the top left. This next part feels slightly counterintuitive, but the droplets are darker on the side closest to the light source. So I make the gradient move from dark to light from the top left towards the bottom right. Now I switch to the white pencil and add a highlight moving in the opposite direction. I want this highlight to be lighter than the paper itself, and this is where the droplets really start to feel rounded. Essentially, this is the light from the top left being caught inside the form of the droplet. The next step is to add some light spilling through the droplets onto the other side of the ground plane. Because of the curve of the droplet, that light becomes concentrated into a kind of funnel shape, a bit like a magnifying glass focusing light. Next I switched to a white gel pen to emphasise that bottom edge. I did pull some of this back afterwards because it became a little too bright and slightly messy, but that sharper white edge is useful for making the water feel kind of glassy and reflective. And this is now my favourite step. I add the reflection of what looks like a window. Rendering these with the white gel pen gives them very definite hard edges, and that really helps suggest the sort of shiny glass-like surface of the water. I give the highlights a slight curve to follow the form of the droplet. It's a small detail, but those small details are often what make the eye believe the illusion. Finally, I go in with a sharp HB pencil to re-establish the droplet boundaries, especially around the highlights. Then I retouch any areas that need a little more tonal contrast so the droplets feel clearer and the type underneath still reads. And I hope you found this useful. The main thing I take from drawings like this is the value of being curious about ordinary visual effects. Raindrops, glass, shadows, reflections, they're everywhere. But when you slow down and really look at them, they give you all sorts of ways to make letters behave strangely. This drawing is fairly complicated, but you could experiment with the same idea using just a square instead of the type underneath, or one letter or a single drop. There'll be more slower follow-along sessions coming soon, so if you enjoyed this, please consider liking and subscribing. So until next time, friends, keep your letters weird and your angles playful.